The Demon Within, Part 4. The demons started to fire at the ship, rocking it back and forth, whilst Kirsteen struggled to get Lindsey out of the room as the control panel exploded. Outside, Lindsey began to wake. "We have to get to the med bay now," Lindsey said in a faint and weak voice. The leader, meanwhile, having been burnt from the explosion, grabbed one of the guns from his fallen comrades and cornered Lindsey and Kirsteen outside. He could barely stand, he was so weak, but, much like Lindsey, his determination drove him on. "You've doomed us all," he said. "Why don't you just pray to your God?" Lindsey said mockingly. The leader raised his weapon and Kirsteen got in the way of Lindsey, begging him to stop. But Lindsey, in response, started to push Kirsteen out of the way. "Stop," Lindsey said. "If you kill us both now, you'll die, and your whole world will die too."
"I knew neither of you would face death with dignity," he sneered.
"We have a med bay with healing magics. It can patch up your wounds. Either you let us help you or you die now and fail your false god," Lindsey explained. The demon hesitated for a few seconds, more because of the pain it was in than anything else. It almost blacked out before raising its gun again.
"All right, but any tricks and I'll make sure you all die with me," he said.
Down on the planet, inside the god's castle, the Maliak leaders in general had been waiting for half an hour for their god to show up. They always dreaded these meetings. At least a few of them wouldn't make it out alive. Normally, when things weren't going to plan, the god would take his frustrations out on a few of the leaders, often just to serve as an example to the others. The god always loved to make his servants wait for long before he turned up. Fortunately for the Maliaks, these meetings were rare due to their diminished numbers. Still, now that the war had ended so badly, they all felt they were for the chop. The god came bursting into the room in a surprisingly good mood for once. He must have something really nasty in mind for us to be that happy, one of the leaders thought, as she gripped her chair in terror. "You've all failed miserably," the god said to his followers. "You'll all suffer for what you've let the demons do to this planet. But don't worry, you may not have the death of your entire species on your conscience. Bring him in." 2 Maliak foot soldiers dragged the professor in before leaving. "That feeble old creature," one of the Maliak leaders said, almost not sure if their god was joking, though he instantly stopped laughing when the god glared at him. "This creature has an intellect far beyond any on this planet. He can build weapons that can allow even a miserable race like the Maliaks to actually win in a fair fight. Imagine that," the god said mockingly. What do you want of us, O master?" one of the leaders said sheepishly. "Oh, nothing. That's the point. I just wanted to let you know why you were all being replaced. I only felt it was polite. Now, goodbye." A portal began to open in the centre of the room, causing several Maliaks to fall into it. The others scrambled for safety, but a magical barrier prevented them from escaping. "You've heard of the Varisva, haven't you, Professor?" the god said, ignoring the screams and pleas of his followers.
"It is one of the most heinous hell dimensions. I take it that's where you're from?" the professor asked.
"Exactly. Even for demons, it's hell." "Please, O Lord, show mercy," the last of the leaders said as it clung to the edge of the floor over the expanding pit. "You fool. I'm not a god. I'm a demon. A lower-level demon, actually, from the pit you're about to fall into. In there I was a nothing, hence why I had to come here, to the natural realm." "No, it can't be. You're lying. This is a test of loyalty," the Maliak said. "I'm afraid not," the false god replied, as it morphed back into its original demon form, much to its servants' horror. The last of these Maliak leaders willingly let go of the ledge and fell into the hell its master had come from. It wouldn't have survived much longer anyway, but it couldn't bear to see the god it had devoted its life to was nothing more than a trickster. It was a worse punishment than anything the demons below could do to him, and the false god always loved to let its minions who had failed it know before it killed them. "Now, let's see. About you helping me win this war, then, shall we, Professor?" Lindsey, Kirsteen and the Maliak leader, meanwhile, made their way to the medibay. The demons had stopped firing on the ship and were attempting to break their way in. "I don't know how long it will hold them," Lindsey, who had repaired her leg completely with magic, said, as she used a similar spell to heal the leader's wounds. The leader kept his gun on the 2 time travellers at all times. Now that we're alone, and since we may only have a few minutes left anyway, why not be honest with us here? Kirsteen said. When me and the Professor first met you, you doubted that god of yours. Now you're desperate to prove your loyalty again. Are you just a coward? You don't seem to be one. The leader was silent. He didn't seem to even acknowledge Kirsteen before she prodded him again. He raised his gun to her in response. I do not have to answer anything to you. Suddenly, the Maliak started to feel faint. What have you done to me? He said, as he dropped his weapon. Lindsey grabbed the gun and pointed it at the former leader. Oh, I forgot to mention, since we control the magics in here, and they're now fused to your body, I can kill you in an instant, if I want. You slimy, treacherous coward. Relax, I didn't say I would kill you. Unlike you, I don't believe in senseless slaughter. It's only if you lay a hand on Kirsteen. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to see if the backup control panel is still working. For your sake, both of you stay here. Wait a minute. I saved your life out there. You can't just leave me here, Kirsteen protested. OK, Kirsteen, you know how to reprogram a magic time machine? Well, no, but... Trust me, you're safer in here. Two's a crowd, Lindsey said, before swiftly exiting the room and shutting the door behind her. Kirsteen was furious. Honestly, if she gets shot in the leg this time, who'll bail her out? The leader just rolled his eyes. God must really be testing me if he locked me in a room with you. Yes, about that. Why are you such a born-again? Don't worry, I won't tell. We're both probably going to die anyway, Kirsteen persisted. Why would you understand? You live your life without any reason. Well, my life hasn't exactly turned out as I planned, but at least I haven't based it around a liar. He's not a liar, the leader insisted. He was almost trying to make sense of his god's behaviour to himself more than he was to Kirsteen, who he didn't even bother to look at. I had a crisis of faith. For my entire life I believed our God that we had been chosen to cleanse the universe of his mistakes. For 40 years we always triumphed until this war. When the demons crushed us, it was more than just a defeat. Everything we had fought for seemed like a lie. Our God appeared weak. We were weak. All of the enemies we had slaughtered. I started to wonder if they had deserved it. If we were not the supreme beings, who were we to have judged them? Then it hit me. God was testing us. Until now he had given our race everything we needed. We had no reason to be truly loyal except out of gratitude. This was to test our mettle to see if we were truly above the others. We had to stick together, still believe in him, even through strife when all of his other races wouldn't. I failed him, but clearly the Maliak's passed his test, as now he has delivered your craft which will allow us to win the war. I can assure you that us coming here had nothing to do with that thing. Of course it did. You may not know it, but he guided you here. Why else would you have come at this exact time and place? I just have the worst luck, that's why. The fact that I'm on this ship in the first place is proof of that. You are part of his plan. We all are. I was a fool not to see it. It's funny, I looked down on all those other soldiers for claiming that God was just testing us when we lost. He clearly favours me, hence why I was also the only one who survived the slaughter of my platoon. That was the final bit of evidence I needed. You're a fool. Actually, no, you're not. You just can't admit that your life has been a waste. When you thought you were going to die, it didn't matter, but now there is a chance your kind might make it out of this. You can't face possibly years with that knowledge, can you? It's sad in a way. You've been duped into thinking you're above the rest of us, and none of you have been able to choose your own destinies. You all follow what someone else wants. The leader tried to strike Kirsteen, only to collapse to the floor. Our magics kept you alive whilst your God sent you to die. Lindsey, meanwhile, reached the emergency control panel. It was damaged, but not to the same extent as the first control panel. With a little magic, she might be able to accelerate its self-repair unit, which was still somewhat weak after their previous battle with the living spaceship. As she tried to remember the spell, Lindsey was soon distracted by the alarm. Now that it was exposed, the demons had managed to breach the ship's defences, and many of them had boarded already and were headed to the control room. The professor was carried down the hall to the main lab of the facility by the demon god itself. The professor made sure the demon had to carry him every step of the way. He dug his claws into the ground when the god tried to drag him. The demon's strength dwarfed that of the vampires, but the professor loved making it as difficult for the demon as he could. When they reached the lab, the demon beat the professor for his insolence. "Oh, how I wish I could just kill you here and now."
"I have a talent for being annoying. It's one of my many skills," the professor said, before spitting one of his teeth the demon had knocked out back in its face.
"I want you to look at our weapons, vampire. Together we should be able to cobble something together to stop those lesser demons above if that bomb doesn't work." Just then, the whole room began to shake, and a Maliak came running into the room. Master, the demons have found us. They're attacking." "Oh, it can't be. There's no way they could have. What news is there of the bomb?" "We've lost contact with the platoon and the vampire's companions." "Well, then, I'm afraid this is it for the Maliaks," the god replied. "Oh, what do you mean?" The god responded by tearing the minion's throat out. The professor, meanwhile, slowly reached for a crude weapon on the table whilst the demon was distracted. "I don't always enjoy it, you know. Centuries I spent building these creatures up. I genuinely thought they were the ones to finally give me the empire I deserved. I hate to have to do this again."
"You're just a sentimental guy, aren't you?" the professor said mockingly.
"Well, on the plus side, I don't have to keep you alive anymore." The professor flipped backwards, and as he did, he fired the small gun he had picked up with both of his hands tied behind his back. The professor shot the demon in both eyes before then shooting at his chains. The vampire then picked up various weapons from the table and fired as many as he could at the demon. The weapons drew the demon's blood, but all of its wounds instantly healed over. Whilst he may have started up as a bottom-feeding demon in the hellish universes, centuries of technology and magic had built up into being a uniquely powerful creature, unlike any other in the universe. The professor then threw a bomb at the ceiling and jumped through the hole it created. Whilst the god was stronger, the professor was faster. "It doesn't matter. He, along with the rest of this world and those demons, will soon fall into my former home forever." Lindsey, meanwhile, despite the presence of the demons, had managed to complete the spell, but just as she was about to fly the ship back to the planet, several of the demons broke their way into the emergency room. These demons were different to any Lindsey had seen on the planet. They were roughly 7 feet tall and had black, rock-like skin, large green eyes, and parts of their bodies glowed red. The demons started to fire at Lindsey, who was barely able to dodge the blasts. Unfortunately, however, the rays instead hit the control panel. "You idiots! You'll create a rip in the vortex!" Lindsey shouted as the ship began to whirl out of control. The professor's vessel went hurling through the vortex, throwing Lindsey and the demons all over the place. Lindsey, however, in the confusion, crawled out of another exit and sealed it shut behind her just as the ship appeared to have landed. It would probably only hold the demons back for a few minutes once they got back on their feet, but that might be enough. As Lindsey ran towards the weapons cabinet, she could hear the moans and screams from outside. She had a feeling she knew where they had landed, but it was too horrible to admit. Still, she had to be sure, so Lindsey first went down to check the scanner, which was just below the room with the weapons cabinet. To her horror, Lindsey saw her suspicions were correct. They had landed in the abyss, an area of time and space where time travellers who had changed history were taken by hideous creatures known as the Guardians. Time could not be changed in any way, shape or form. Doing so would create a paradox that would threaten to poison the timeline and destroy the universe. The Guardians' job was to fix any paradoxes and imprison the time travellers who created them. Time had no meaning in the abyss. Anyone who was imprisoned there would remain so forever. The abyss itself was nothing but a large, dark, empty wasteland. Prisoners were not made to suffer by the Guardians, but at the same time there was nothing for them to do. Prisoners couldn't have children in the abyss. There were no resources for them to even build houses or shelters, just endless sand. There were certainly no luxuries or forms of entertainment either. Life in the abyss was just an endless tedium which would almost always drive its occupants insane. Many of the occupants resorted to attacking and killing each other just to have something to do. It wouldn't take long for the Guardians to notice a time ship had crashed. They would most likely just return it to the vortex, but Lindsey didn't want to take the chance that they might see the professor's ship as a rescue attempt and decide to just imprison her anyway. You did not want to be on the Guardians' wanted list. No time traveller had ever escaped these mysterious creatures. Their power was beyond comprehension. Above all else, Lindsey hoped to escape before her former friend, Helioma, found them. On the scanner, Lindsey could see through the darkness several humanoid figures from races all over the universe gathering around the ship. all former time travellers like her who thought they could change their destiny in some way for the better and had paid a heavy price for it. Many of the prisoners had been driven mad to the point where they simply jumped around the time machine like animals, but a few began to inspect it. Lindsey so wished she could help them, but if she even lifted a finger for any of the prisoners, then she would join them in a second. Lindsey went for the weapons chest and pulled out the largest weapon she could find, a Maliak cannon. The Maliak were vicious warrior demons who had weapons built into their bodies. The cannon was a trophy from one of the Professor's greatest victories in stopping an invasion of a world in the heavenly realm form from them. The Professor, however, generally tended not to use his weapons chest unless he had to. He didn't have anything against using them in defence. The Professor, much like Lindsey, preferred non-violent means, but was willing to use them if need be. Still, the Professor often felt that his weapons got in the way more than anything else. His spells, which he could recite from memory, were often just as, if not more effective in dealing with magical creatures, and, unlike the weapons, could not be disarmed or taken away from him and were easier to hide. Though, even then, he could only carry a select amount of spells with him on each mission. Nevertheless, Lindsey was glad the Professor hadn't thrown them out now. She ran back down the corridor to where she had left the demons, but they had already broken out of the control room and were waiting for her. Lindsey raised the Maliak cannon and shot at the first rock demon. The cannon was so strong, however, that she stumbled back a little when she fired and hit the monster's shoulder instead. The blast was strong enough, however, to take the demon's shoulder and arm below clean off. Lindsey then fired a second shot into the demon's chest, blowing a hole in it. The demon then sank to its knees where Lindsey delivered a final shot to its head, blowing it up. The other two demons fled down a near corridor. Lindsey tried to run after the monsters, but she suddenly saw 3 humanoid figures standing at the end of another corridor beside her. They were all dressed in ratty clothes, with a confused look of despair on their faces.
"Help us, please. I can't take it any more. I've been a prisoner for..."
one of them said, before Lindsey raised her cannon. The prisoners, who'd been able to enter through a hole in the ship the demons had created with their weapons, very presence here could make the Guardians think Lindsey was helping them. "You need to get out, now," she said with regret. The woman got on her knees and started begging Lindsey. She hated herself for it, but Lindsey rammed her cannon into the young woman's ribs. "I mean it," she said more forcefully. The young woman began to back off somewhat, as did the others. "I'm sorry, I really am. I wish there was something I could do, but if you don't leave, you'll doom me and my crew," Lindsey explained.
"Misery loves company,"
the young woman said while smiling. Suddenly, a large figure appeared from behind and grabbed Lindsey in a bear hug. She tried to break free, but its strength was immense.